Thank you for joining us on this Wednesday evening. It's good to see you. We've got a very important topic that we're going to be discussing this evening, and so I'm glad that you chose to join us. A couple of things I'll let you know from the beginning is we are recording this meeting, and so a couple of days or so after this, we'll have everything edited and packaged and posted on our website. So if you want to go back and review that, or maybe let some others that you know that weren't able to attend tonight go back and review the recording, that would be great. And the other thing is that we'll have an opportunity at the end to take questions and try to get answers for those. And so if you want to put those questions in the chat, that'll be the best way to get your questions asked, and then we'll go through the chat and make sure that we address your questions at the end of the presentation. Before we get started with the presentation, there's several people that I want to thank. You may not know it, but Barrow County has a suicide prevention task force. It involves multiple agencies that serve families in our community, and that group is the host group for tonight's meeting. And I just want to mention first the agencies that are involved, and then I'll go through and mention some names as a word of thank you. They have been working together for a number of years on suicide prevention in Barrow County, and for the last several months on this event specifically. So I just want to say a big thank you, because we really appreciate the partnerships that we have represented on this task force. Barrow County Emergency Services are involved. Our Barrow County Sheriff's Office is involved. Barrow County School System is a partner. North Georgia Health Systems, Social Empowerment Center, Barrow Ministry Village, and the Spirit of Sharing. And those are agencies that serve families in our community, and we're very appreciative of each agency for being willing to share staff and resources with us to work together on the Suicide Prevention Task Force for Barrow County. Specifically, I want to mention these names as individuals from those agencies that have been involved: Scott Dakin, Heather Stafford, Christina Lowe, Ken Green. I think I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Ken Green. I'm Assistant Superintendent with the Barrow County School System. Heather Kimball, Ben McDaniel, Adam Rawlerson, Jennifer Benford, Latrina Slater, Teresa Brown, Becky Lee, and Melinda Sheely. And you'll see those names again towards the end of our presentation. So those are the people that have worked together to make this event a reality. So without any further ado, you didn't come to hear me talk, and so we're not going to do any more of that. We're going to get right into our topic: a conversation worth having with your student, supporting your youth through grief and loss. We know that the circumstances that we've been in for the last 18 months has really turned our worlds upside down, and we're really working hard to try to best meet the needs of our students and the mental health of our students and staff. And so that was one of the reasons that we wanted to host this event this evening. So that's our topic, and we have a couple of expert presenters that have joined us. And I'm going to introduce both of them right now, so the presentation will flow from there. From the Social Empowerment Center, we have Dr. Latrina Slater, and she's the Executive Director of the Social Empowerment Center. And from the North Georgia Health System, Laurelwood, we have Adam Rawlerson, the Business Development Manager. So thank you for being willing to present, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Slater and Mr. Rawlerson.
Thank you, Dr. Green. I'm happy to be here. Welcome to everyone. We're going to jump right in. We are here because of the alarming rates of suicide in our community. And as you can see by the prevalence rates right here on the screen, on average, there are about 130 suicides per day nationwide. In 2020, one person died every 6 hours by suicide in Georgia. Suicide is the second leading cause of death in the 10 to 34 age bracket, and the fourth leading cause in the 35 to 54 age bracket in Georgia. So it is astounding, it is concerning, it is alarming, and we're here today to talk about it because suicide is not inevitable for anyone. By starting the conversation, providing support, and directing help to those who need it, we can prevent suicide and save lives. And so that's what we're here to talk about today. And so just as Dr. Green mentioned, there's a lot going on in our world that affects our mental health. Next slide, please. So we know that COVID has been rough for everyone, right? We've been socially distancing. We've been in and out of quarantine situations. We've been on lockdown. We've regained some level of connectedness, but not complete. It's not what it was before COVID, and that takes a toll on us. And the condition of COVID and how it's being in a pandemic has affected jobs and finances and the family. And I want to specifically talk about how disconnectedness and family stressors like jobs and finances affect children too. I want us to keep that in mind, that even though the children are not responsible for paying bills, they feel the tension and when there's stress there. And so there's also lots of sickness around us related to COVID, and lots of loss and death, right? And so even if you're not directly affected, maybe it's not someone in your family, we know people who've lost people. Our children know people who've lost people. And so that affects us. That affects our mental health. And then just the unending uncertainty, right? When is this going to be over? When are we going to go back to normal? What is the end point of COVID and we resume our regular lives? That creates a stress that affects us, and it affects our children. Next slide. And then we have to look at the effects of cell phones and social media and the technological age that we're in. Just like this, you see in this picture, we can be together and not necessarily be communicating. We can be together and not be connected because we're connected elsewhere through our tablets and our laptops and our cell phones. And this tends to affect us in ways that we don't always readily know, right? And so when that communication is disrupted and there's disconnection, that affects our children. We're not always engaged in the ways that we could be that help support our mental health and our well-being and our emotions, right? Because we're all on our devices. And then we know that social media tends to give us a sense of discontentment, can give us a sense of discontentment, right? You're looking at people and they look so happy and they're traveling and they're on vacation and it looks like other people are happier than you are. It looks like they're doing better. And sometimes as adults, we're able to kind of filter that out. But the truth of the matter is children don't always have that ability to say, oh, that's not real, that's just a snapshot and not necessarily just life. So all these things affect us. And then just the overstimulation of being on technology all the time. It's exhausting, it wears on us. And so when you look at the technological age that we're in and you look at being in a global pandemic, we are hugely affected, and so are our children. And so we want to recognize that. Go to the next slide. And so all these things contribute to our mental health. And mental health, even though it's a word that we use and it kind of is, a little can have a negative connotation, it simply refers to how we think and how we feel, right? So being in a pandemic affects that, being disconnected and being connected to technology as opposed to our family, to humans, it affects our mental health. And that goes for adults and children. And so we just want to be aware of what's going on in the world, how it can affect us, how it can affect our children. And then we want to take some action to make sure that we're keeping our children safe and well. Next slide. So Mr. Rawlinson is going to come in a little bit, and he's going to tell you about how to engage in the conversation, specific things that you can do, some tools that you can take with you. But I just want to mention a few things as we lead to that. We can go back. So a few things we want to avoid when we think about connecting with our children around what's going on with them. We want to make sure that we're not minimizing, right? And saying, oh, it's not that bad. And, you know, you're having a bad day because of what? It can't be that bad. It's not that bad. We don't want to minimize. We want to acknowledge and validate. Also, we don't want to come from a position of comparing. And this is something I'm very aware of. When I was a child and I would tell my mom I was stressed, she was like, you don't know stress. I got bills, I got a job, I have a boss. And, you know, we as adults, we can look at kids' stress as not necessarily equal to ours. And we can minimize that. Also leads to us minimizing their feelings. But if it's big to them, then let it be big to them and give them space to share, you know, what's affecting them and how it's impacting them. The other thing that we want to avoid is pushing the "you're strong" misconception, right? You know, don't worry about that. You're strong. You can handle it. Just because someone died at your school, you can handle it. You don't have to break down. You're strong. And that is, you know, the strong it's just an absolute misconception, because strong or not, things affect us. They affect us as an adult, and they absolutely can affect children as well. So we don't want to push that off on our children. And then lastly, we want to make sure that as we are trying to survive life and all that's going on, that our children are not getting lost in the shuffle, right? You know, sometimes it's like, feel like we're hurting our kids. Now, come on, it's time to go. Hurry up. Let's drive to the drive-thru, get you something to eat. Let's go over here. Now, when we get home, you get on your computer, do your homework over here, because I have a meeting. Get quiet. And so there's a lot of shuffling around children, and we want to make sure that we are pausing, we're connecting with our children, we're being intentional about checking in and connecting, even though things are so busy and so overwhelming for us. We want to avoid that. Okay, just before I hand it off to Mr. Rawlinson, I want to talk a little bit about myths, some of the myths related to suicide. Next slide, please. Okay, so here's the myth. No one can stop a suicide. It's inevitable. The fact is, if people in a crisis get the help that they need, the thought of suicide can be detained. That's why we're here, because it's absolutely preventable. It is not inevitable. Another myth, confronting a person about suicide will only make them angry and increase the risk of suicide. Fact is, asking someone directly about suicidal intent lowers their anxiety, opens up communication, and lowers the risk of an impulsive act. Next myth, only experts can prevent suicide. Fact is, suicide prevention is everyone's business. Schools, the mental health providers, the parents, anyone can help prevent the tragedy of suicide. Next slide. Suicidal people keep their plans to themselves. Truth is, most suicidal people communicate their intent sometime during the week preceding their attempt in some way. Another myth, those who talk about suicide don't do it. Fact is, people who talk about suicide may try or may even go through with it. Once a person decides to commit suicide, there's nothing anyone can do to stop them. Fact is, suicide is the most preventable kind of death, and almost any positive action may save a life. Next. Last myth, if a suicidal person tells a friend, the friend will access help. Fact is, most young people do not tell an adult. Children are really good at keeping their friends' secrets. And this is a secret we don't want kept. Okay, so that's why we want to show up and we want to have the conversation. And so Mr. Rawlinson is going to come next, and he's going to talk specifically about what we need to do.
Thank you, Dr. Slater. And that's great information. What you've provided is so true. And what we're seeing is all of the stress over the last year and a half, 2 years, has only increased the anxiety, the depression, the stress on families, and especially our youth, as they bear the burden a lot of times of our family stress. And so we know that's true, that we see a lot of our young people that are struggling with thoughts of suicide. And so just want to spend a few minutes talking about how we can intervene, and look for the warning signs when we're concerned about our youth. Let me start by saying, as I teach this class throughout my experiences and what I've learned is, I often have survivors in my class. And so I just want to say, as I do with every class that I teach, there may be content that we talk about tonight that is distressing to you. It may be upsetting. And so I do hope that if that's your case, and if that is a situation that you're experiencing, please reach out to some of the resources we're going to talk about tonight, and make sure you get some help and some support. We know that suicide impacts a lot of people, and I want to be sensitive to that. So I just want to say that up front. The content we talk about may be difficult for you. So next slide. So the model that we talk about and we teach, it's an evidence-based model. It's called QPR. It's called Question, Persuade, Refer. And I teach this class all around the state and in our region. And really the intent is to help common lay people, parents, church members, school personnel, anybody that can come into contact with youth. We teach them how to look for warning signs and look for youth that are struggling and in distress. And we teach them how to have the conversation about suicide. It's a difficult conversation. No one really likes to talk about death. It's uncomfortable. How do you even get there? And so what we try to do is provide you a very simple way of talking to youth and getting to a place where you can ask the question about suicide. So just some global warning signs that I wanted to share. Warning signs can be very direct. They can be indirect. They can be real prevalent. They can be different types of warning signs and clues. The main thing is we want to take all of these things very seriously. And when we're concerned about somebody, we want to go ahead and start to think about how we're going to have this conversation. Next slide. Again, just some global clues, because we're going to talk about some very specific clues in just a minute. But any sort of threat to hurt a person, themselves, if they talk about killing themselves, obviously that's a warning sign. If there's a talk about death, maybe their peer group is talking about something that happened at school and now I'm feeling kind of sad and upset. If you're seeing anxiety, depression, or kids aren't sleeping, you can tell they're in distress. Maybe they've started using substances. All of these things are very global warning signs that we're seeing across the board. And we want to be able to pay close attention to those and be able to intervene. Next slide. So what we want to talk about next are some very specific warning signs that we're going to have verbal warning signs, both direct and indirect. We're going to have some behavioral warning signs, and we're going to have some situational warning signs. And these are things that we want to pay attention to and look at. And if you start to see some of these things, it should raise some red flags up for you to know that you need to go ahead and start having a conversation. Next slide, please. So when we talk about direct verbal clues, it's exactly what it says. Sometimes a direct statement is, I've thought about killing myself. I'm going to go home tonight and I'm going to do it. I'm just going to end it all. If my girlfriend breaks up with me, that's it. I can't take it anymore. I'm going to kill myself. These are very direct statements. And should you hear that, you want to respond immediately. Next slide, please. Then we have the indirect verbal clues. They're a little more vague. They may be things like, if I just went away, nobody would even notice. Nobody would even care. My family's under a lot of stress. Maybe if I went away, if something happened to me, they wouldn't have to worry about all the trouble I've caused, or you're not going to have to worry about me much longer. Who cares nobody would even notice if I died. So what does it matter? These are all indirect clues. They're not directly stating they're going to go home and hurt themselves, but they're kind of given that notion that they've been thinking about it, and maybe they don't feel like anybody really cares if they were to die. Next slide, please. So when we talk about behavioral clues, these are things that you might recognize and see in a youth that would cause some red flags. So any sort of previous suicide attempt would obviously be a risk factor for any future attempts. If you hear about a student talking about their dad's gun, or maybe they have medications, pill bottles that they've never had before. If you hear about a student giving away any of their prized possessions, things that are very meaningful to them, or talking about plans for who's going to take care of their pet, you know, those are all kind of behavioral clues that we want to look at. Anger, irritability, you know, if a kid's been kind of laid back and chill, and all of a sudden they're real snippy with their friends, they're kind of irritated and agitated all the time, that's a big warning sign, a behavioral clue that we want to look at. Truancy, obviously, or running away behavior. Those are all behavioral clues. Next slide. When we think about situational clues, this could be anything from family conflict. We talked about, Dr. Slater mentioned, you know, some of the economic crisis that we've been in, and the financial stress that families are under. That's a major situational risk factor for our youth, because they do bear the burden. A lot of our youth bear the burden of that, what they're hearing in the family about the financial problems, and families can't pay their bills. And so some of our youth actually think, well, I'm one less mouth to feed, so I'm going to help my family by, you know, ending my life. Death of a friend or family member, especially if it's suicide, would be a major risk factor for us. So there are other things, you know, if a kid's kind of failing in school, all of a sudden they've been a good student, or they get expelled, or there's some other disciplinary situation going on. This would be red flags that we would kind of say, hey, something's not going right with them, and I need to check and see what's going on. Next slide. Now, some other things that impact our youth, if you were to get a diagnosis of a terminal illness, or a family member, you know, if a parent gets diagnosed with terminal cancer, that's a major risk factor for our youth. One of the biggest ones that we're seeing is feeling embarrassed or getting humiliated in front of their peer group. You know, for young people, their peer group is so important. And if something happens at school, or something happens in a relationship and that gets posted on social media, that's a major risk factor for youth, because that peer group relationship is so strong. And if you feel humiliated or embarrassed or less than, and you know it's going around social media and it's viral and everybody's talking about it and it's nonstop, it just kind of goes on and on. That's a lot for a young person to bear. And then bullying, you know, it used to be when I was in school, if you got bullied at school, at least at the end of the day, you got to go home and you didn't have to be around the bully. And now with social media, we're seeing a lot of this online bullying, that on bullying 24/7. It never stops. And so we have to be real concerned about that. And if you hear of young people that are struggling with this online bullying, honestly, a lot of the adolescents we have at Laurelwood, part of the main trigger for them is the online bullying that they're experiencing. So we want to pay close attention to that. Okay, next slide. Now, these are just some other areas that you might notice, you might see in a youth that you want to be concerned about, especially the physical symptoms. You know, if there's chronic pain, or if you see changes in sleeping pattern, they complain about headaches a lot, or stomach problems. These are all things that, it may not be about suicide, but it certainly would be a cause for concern. And you would want to, you know, talk to the youth and find out, hey, what's going on with you? I've noticed these changes. If there's a change in family dynamics, so if there's a divorce, or a separation, or loss of a job, a move to a new community, all of those things are concerns that we would want to kind of pay attention to. Next slide. So you notice all these clues that are kind of raising the hair on the back of your neck and kind of giving you an uncomfortable feeling, like, hey, something's not right with this person. And so you're starting to feel concerned, and you know you want to have a conversation and you want to talk about what's going on, but I don't really want to go directly to suicide, or I'm concerned about them, but I just don't know how to have the conversation. So just some general tips whenever you're concerned about somebody and you're thinking you might have to talk about suicide, if in doubt, just go ahead and have the conversation. I don't know how many families I've worked with over the years where they were concerned about somebody, but they didn't feel comfortable talking, and then the person ends up dying by suicide, and now they have to bear that guilt for the rest of their life. And that's what they come to me for, is they can't escape the feeling that they could have done something. And so if you're in doubt, just go ahead and have the conversation. It may be awkward, but you're going to have peace, and the other person is going to feel relieved that, hey, somebody actually noticed I was struggling. Make sure you have a private setting to talk to the person. I mean, you don't want this to be out in the middle of the public space and you have these private conversations. You want to be a good listener, so you don't want to do all the talking. You want to just be able to listen, and make sure you have plenty of time. You don't want to rush it and say, hey, I want to hear what's going on, but I got a meeting in 5 minutes, so you're going to have to speak quickly. You don't want to do that. And then if you are approaching somebody and you want to talk about suicide, make sure you have resources on hand, because if you're having that conversation, you might get flustered. You want to make sure you know exactly what to do to help the person should they be in distress. We'll always remember, how you ask the question is less important than the fact that you actually ask the question. That's the most important thing. Okay, next slide. So with that said, most of us like to use a less direct approach. And so we don't really want to just go right up to somebody and say, hey, have you thought about killing yourself? We want a more gentle approach. Have you been unhappy lately? I noticed some things aren't going well. Have you ever thought about, if you went to sleep and didn't wake up, that would be okay? That's a very indirect approach. It's very soft. There are other ways of saying that. And for most of us, that's the most comfortable way of doing that. I prefer the direct approach. I've been doing this for a long time. Next slide. The direct approach is literally what it says. And so if I see somebody that I'm concerned about, I'm going to go directly to them and say, hey, I've noticed these things. You seem to be really upset and in distress. I just need to know, have you thought about killing yourself? Now that takes, some nerve. It takes some patience. It takes some experience. Like I said, I've been doing this for a long time, and so I'm very comfortable being direct and asking the question. And there's really no beating around the bush. It's a yes, I thought about it, or no, I haven't. They may try to tell me they haven't been thinking about it, but you can generally you can tell if someone's been thinking about suicide. And honestly, as Dr. Slater mentioned, one of the myths is it's going to cause distress if you go up and ask the person that, or you try to talk about it. In reality, it relieves that anxiety, that inside turmoil that people are going through. And most of the time, if you ask that question and they have been thinking about it, you'll see them just kind of go, yes, I have been thinking about it, and I need help. If you can't ask the question, find somebody that you know that can go with you that is willing to ask the question. If you're concerned about somebody enough to think you may have to ask the question, and you can't do it, find somebody that you can. Okay? Next slide. Now, when I said it's the most important thing is to ask the question, don't worry about how you ask the question. There is some guidelines about what we don't want to do when we're talking to somebody about suicide. We certainly don't want to make them feel like they're less than, or they're stupid for having these thoughts. And so you wouldn't want to say, you're not thinking of killing yourself, are you? Like, if somebody asks me that question, my response is going to be, well, of course not. No, because there's judgment associated with that. So there's certain ways you don't want to ask the question, leading questions or judgmental questions. You want the person to be able to freely say, yes, I've been thinking about that. And they're not going to be able to do that if they don't know that you're genuinely concerned. Okay, next slide. So you've recognized these warning signs, you're concerned about somebody, you've built up the courage to have the conversation, and you've asked the question. And you've asked the person, have you thought about killing yourself? And they say yes. What do you do now? Because that's the greatest fear people have. The fear is, if I ask somebody if they thought about killing themselves and they say yes, what do I do then? I don't know what to do. And so we don't ask because of our fear. Well, in QPR, what we teach is the P, and that is persuade. So someone said, yes, I've thought about killing myself. Now you move from that awkward conversation to, you want to persuade them to stay alive. And so you're going to be as positive as you can be. You're going to listen to them. You're going to give them your full attention. I heard this years ago when I started teaching this class, this next statement: remember, suicide is not the problem, only the solution that this person has perceived is the only solution that they have. It's the only solution they've been able to come with because everything else they've tried hasn't worked. And so I've been a marriage and family therapist for years, and for a long time, we always treated suicide as the problem. And in reality, what we were missing was the problem is that's the only solution they've been able to come up with. So what we have to kind of walk back to is, what is the problem that's causing them to get to the place where they think death is the only option for them? So we have to get to that place. We want to offer hope at any cost, whatever it takes to help them understand that they are valued, they are loved, they are cared for, and that it would mean a lot to us if they stayed alive. That's the next part of this. And so there's no magic answer other than loving on people. You know, that's what it boils down to, is loving on people, making sure they understand that you care about them. Next slide. So you've told them that, hey man, I really need for you to be safe and to let's look at some other options. Then the next thing you want to do is ask them, will you go with me to get help? Can I take you somewhere to get help? Can we go and talk to the school counselor? Can I go with you to your appointment? Can I go talk to your parents? Will you let me get the help for you that you need? You may not be able to talk to them, but let me help you to talk to them. Now that last statement, will you promise me not to kill yourself until we found some help? That's not like a contract. You know, for a long time, we did these safety contracts. And that's not what it's saying here. It's kind of like if you had a friend that you've invited to church, hey, will you promise me to go to church on Sunday? I'll meet you there. This is what that statement is about. Now, personally, when I talk to people and they said, yes, I've been thinking about suicide, I'm not waiting for them to make me a promise to go get help. I'm literally taking them to get help, whatever that may be. Whether I'm at church and somebody's thinking about suicide, or whether I'm at work, we're going to figure out a plan, and I'm going to help you get to the place that you need to be to get the help that you need. Always remember that your willingness to listen and to offer support and help makes all the difference in the world, and probably is going to save their life. You may be the only person that they've talked to. I tell this story in my classes, and I'll be brief here, but I don't know if any of you guys heard about the man years ago that jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge, and he actually survived that fall, and now he's a spokesperson and a champion for suicide prevention. But I'll tell you just real quick, his name's Kevin Hines. If you read about his story, what he says is, as he's walking to the Golden Gate Bridge, he made his mind up that morning that he was going to jump off the bridge and kill himself. And he said, if one person stops me and asks me about how I'm doing, then that'll be enough for me to say, okay, I'm not going to kill myself. So as he's leaving his home, his dad was concerned about him, but his dad didn't really engage in conversation. He just said, hey, I'll take off today if you want me to. I can stay with you. And Kevin says, no, that's okay. Just go to work. So as he's driving to Golden Gate Bridge, he parks. As he's walking onto the bridge, he passes by several construction workers. Now he's visibly crying at this point. No one says anything. He walks by some security guards. They don't say anything. He gets to the bridge. He's visibly upset. And a lady approaches him with an accent. She's a tourist. And she asked him if he could take her picture. And so he says that he took the picture, he handed her the camera back, and he jumped off the bridge. He said immediately he regretted his decision. Now, when he fell into the water, obviously he had significant injuries, and he actually was saved by a manatee. A manatee came up and kind of kept him afloat until the Coast Guard got there. But the key to that is when he said, if one person would have just asked me how I was doing and if I was okay, that would have been enough for me to not jump off of that bridge. And no one did it. And so that speaks volumes to the fact that when you see somebody in distress, you never know what what you're asking them and talking to them and listening to them, you never know how that's going to change their life and change your life. And so always know that you make a difference by doing that. Next slide. Oh yeah, there's that statement again with those cute little kids there. Next slide. Okay, so you've persuaded them to stay alive, and they've talked to you about the fact that they have thought about suicide, and now they want to get help. What do you do now? Where are you going to go? What are you going to do? And so the next step is to refer. The R in QPR is to refer. And so in this section, what we want to do is get them connected to the resource that can best help them, whatever that might be. A lot of times young people don't think they can be helped because they've tried everything and nothing has worked, and now they're desperate. They're at the point where there's nothing that's going to help. So you may have to be really persuasive and really help them understand that things can be different, and I'm going to walk with you every step of the way. Now, if at all possible, like I said before, you want to walk the person directly to get help. You want to be directly involved in that process. If they refuse help, you may have to.
Okay, I apologize. It looks like Adam has frozen. If y'all will be a little bit patient, hopefully he will unfreeze here in a second and can resume the presentation. I apologize for this technological glitch, but unfortunately it's the world we live in these days. All right, it looks like he had to get off, but I'll watch for him to log back on, and as soon as he logs back in, we'll admit him to the presentation and resume where we are. Thank you for being patient. In the meantime, let me just remind you that we are recording this session. We will post it on the Barrow County School System website so that you can refer back to it. And if you've got friends or family members that you know that could benefit from this, once it's posted, you can refer them to the website so that they can watch the video. The other thing that I will mention while we're waiting on Adam to rejoin us is that if you have questions for either of our presenters, feel free to type them in the chat and we will work on getting answers for you. So the two things to keep in mind is the video recording, which will be posted as soon as we can get it, but give us a couple of days to get that taken care of. And if you've got questions, feel free to put them in the chat. Thank you. I see some questions coming in, and so we will attempt to answer some of these while we're waiting on Adam to rejoin us. We were actually about to get to the section in our presentation that would give you some resources that are available, free resources to help you for referral resources. Those are in the next slide or two. So thank you for that. We will be able to show you those resources here in just a slide or two. If for some reason, if Adam's not rejoining us in the next minute or so, we'll try to forge ahead even without him, but that information will be answered in the next 2 or 3 slides, starting with the next slide, actually. Thank you for your questions. And thank you for your patience. I apologize that we've had technical difficulties with this. It's 7:11. We'll give him 2 minutes, and if he's not been able to rejoin us in 2 minutes, then we're going to kind of plow through these last few slides of resources. Without Adam, we have a few people who are mental health folks from our school system, and Dr. Slater from Social Empowerment, who are here, who can probably walk us through those last few slides. If Adam, Mr. Rollerson, is not able to join us in 1 more minute. We'll give him 1 more minute, and then we'll forge on ahead without him. I'm gonna show my video so you know who's talking to you. Okay, let's go ahead and advance the slides, and let's see if the team of us from Barrow County Schools and Dr. Slater can assist with going through these slides. So this is a list of some of the agencies that we're working with in Barrow County that are local, that can provide some assistance. Barrow Ministry Village, the Treehouse are both local agencies here in Barrow County. There's also the Suicide Prevention Lifeline. That is listed for you there, 1-800-273-TALK. Or you can go to the website at suicidepreventionlifeline.org. There's also the Georgia Crisis and Access Line, which is there in the box that says it's okay to not be okay. They have the crisis line at 1-800-715-4225. And then another partner agency that's working across our state and nation to provide awareness and training is NAMI, and I will ask for forgiveness for the acronym that NAMI stands for. Maybe one of our other partners can help me remember that. Good question here. How does the schools help students going through severe depression? Well, one of the things that our school staff are going to know is to just try to begin first to notice that. As Mr. Rollerson was talking about, noticing the symptoms and signs that was presented earlier so that we can identify the students that need extra support. All of our schools have a school counselor assigned to them, and we also have school social workers in our system to be able to meet with students to try to assess the nature of the problem. And also, thank you, National Alliance on Mental Illness, to be able to make connections with resources either in the community or even in our schools. We do have in-school mental health services. Social Empowerment is a prime agency working with us to send therapists into our school to work directly with our students in need, and we can also make referrals to outside resources as well. So our school counselors and our school social workers serve as a point of contact to help make connections with the services that students may need once we learn of a student in need of additional support, whether that be severe depression or other kinds of mental health needs. Let's go ahead and advance to the next slide. So we've already gotten to some questions you've begun asking. Are there any additional questions that you would like to answer? I've got some of our staff that are on standby to be able to help answer. One of our school social workers, our lead social worker, Jennifer Benford, is on the call. Dr. Christina Lowe, who's our Director of Student Services and coordinates the work of our school counselors, is also on the call. And just to remind you that so is Dr. Slater with Social Empowerment Center. So continue to keep the questions rolling. If you have any additional questions that you would like to ask? Thank you, those who've asked questions. These are really helpful questions.
I put an additional question in the chat box if by chance you might be able to answer it.
Sure. So there's a question here. Have we lost any children to death by suicide here in Barrow County? If so, I think it'd be beneficial to mention it so people understand it is here at home and not just something that won't affect us. Yes, we have. I don't have specific statistics on that over the past several years, but I will tell you that we have had over the past, say, 5 to 7 years, several students who have died by suicide in Barrow County. And it's always a tragic situation when that happens. But we have, it is not something that avoids Barrow County, which is one of the reasons that we felt like it was really important to have this so we could be partners with our families in trying to both recognize that and also to partner with resources to address that, because we certainly don't want that to ever happen again. So we have another question. What can the school do about the prevention discussion with the students directly prior to the critical need? So would one of our school folks, maybe Dr. Lowe, Dr. Benford, if either of you would want to sort of address that?
Sure. Our school counselors spend a lot of time, especially in the high schools, talking about suicide prevention with our students. I was in classrooms last week doing some lessons over at BASA on the SOS Signs of Suicide program, where we're teaching students the acronym ACT, and it's acknowledge that the student or their friends are going through some stuff and maybe they're showing signs of depression. The C stands for care, and just showing them that they care. And then the T is tell a trusted adult. So we're working with our students throughout all of our schools, showing them, that these are the things that you need to do and the steps you can take. And we have counselors K through 12. And so, our school counselors do this starting at a very young age, but in a way that's appropriate developmentally for our students.
I would say also, if you have a concern about your student, because we do have school counselors in every school and school social workers that support them as well, get in touch with your child's school counselor if you have concerns. And they can be a resource. They can help you connect with resources to make sure that we're partnering with you as a parent to provide and connect with resources that your child might need. Anybody else with any additional questions?
Yes, I do. I have a question. So we already know that now these days, bullying is actually a big issue that we have in today's society, especially with the, with teenagers or whatever. My question to you guys will be, if there is an issue with a kid or whatever, how does the school handle that situation? For example, if we as a parent, we are not aware of it, but the school is much aware of it, how do you guys handle that situation?
Well, the school is going to investigate any situation that would be harassment of other students or anything that would be related to bullying. If we believe that there's a case that involves any of our students either being bullied or the person engaged in bullying behavior, then we're going to reach out and notify the parent of either situation so that you'll be involved from the beginning. We certainly ask our parents that if you are aware of situations that may be bullying, that you let our schools know. it's more difficult to deal with situations when you aren't aware of them, and not everything comes to our attention. But when something does come to our attention, then our principals, our assistant principals in our schools are going to look into that situation. They're going to address the situation to make sure that we take the actions that we need to take to make sure it ends. And we're going to work as a partner with you to keep the parent in the loop about what's going on and the things that we're doing to make sure that we can stop any bullying that may be occurring in our schools.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Okay, so this is an interesting question. Thank you. Who do we contact if we are interested in a group class or info on suicide prevention for an organization or other group? Excellent question. Is there one of our panel members that can answer that?
Dr. Green, Mr. Rollerson, who spoke to our group, has actually they have a grant to provide QPR training for a variety of organizations and groups. And so you can contact him through Laurelwood. I believe his contact information is also on I hope, on one of the screens in this
Let's go ahead and advance
slideshow.
the slide, and let's see if we got contact information from Mr. Rollerson. So there we go. You can talk to the Laurelwood intake line, and you see the numbers that are there. And again, this will be recorded and posted on our website. 770-219-2888 or 1-800-848-3649. And so that would help you to get in touch with Mr. Rollerson, and then he would be able to discuss your interest in training for a group or organization.
Dr. Green,
Yes.
if you will allow me to expound a little bit on the Georgia Crisis and Access Line and when that is appropriate to use. That's called GCAL, and it is a resource if anyone has a child or an adult or anyone that you're in the presence of who is actively suicidal or saying that, this is what they want to do. And sometimes we can take that person to a hospital to be evaluated. Sometimes they won't agree to go. And so in the past, the recourse was to call 911, but now Georgia has established this line, this crisis and access line, to keep policemen from being involved in mental health crisis, because we know that doesn't always end well, right? So you can actually call this 1-800-715-4225, and a licensed professional will come to where you are and assess that person, that child or adult, to determine if they need to go into the hospital to make sure that they're safe. And so you can use it when in doubt, write it down, keep it in your home, keep it in your phone. And no one's going to be mad at you if they come out and the child is now calm or they change their mind. We always recommend that you err on the side of safety and utilize that resource. So if it's after school hours where you can't get in touch with the counselor or a school social worker, you can absolutely call this line and someone will come to you.
Thank you, Dr. Slater. So someone's put a comment in the chat to please reach out to Social Empowerment, Project Family, or other resources to help on assessments, because those are organizations that can help you to assess your child if you have concerns. And someone has also posted, if you have a MERA group, you can contact your child care coordinator to see what psychiatrist may be in the area that would be covered by a MERA group. Let me scroll down here. Okay, I think.
Excuse me, I have one question.
Okay.
So do you guys have all the information in Spanish, and is there any way the non-English spoken people can actually reach out if they want to reach out to any of these phone lines or whatever. Is there any like a Spanish line or something like that for people that don't really understand it, pretty well and want to get some information or whatever?
Yes, excellent question. Dr. Brimper, you're nodding your head. Would you like to take that one?
The National Suicide Prevention Hotline has interpreters and Spanish speaking and lots of other languages also available. Georgia Crisis and Access Line also has people who speak a variety of languages. Sometimes they have to use a language line depending on the different languages that call in, but they do have people available to help interpret.
Thank you very much.
All right, these are excellent questions and I appreciate them. Okay, we had another question. Do you have Spanish resources? We just answered that question related to phone lines. If there are additional, some of the other information we have that is in Spanish, or we can get it translated for you. If we don't have something in Spanish already or in another language, we certainly will work with you if you will let us know the kinds of information that you're looking for to find that resource in Spanish if we don't already have it. So I would suggest that you reach out to your child's counselor, and they will then reach out to our district office personnel, and we'll work with you to help connect you with the resources that you would need. Yes, and that's in writing would be what we'll work on getting for you. All right. Well, we're right at the end of our time together. I very much appreciate all of you for joining us. Thank you for participating and asking questions. Always remember that your school counselor is a resource for you, along with our school social workers. Our school staff really want to partner with families to support the mental health needs of our families. We're so grateful for our presenters. Thank you again, Dr. Slater and the Social Empowerment Center, and all the work that we're able to do together. And even though he's not on here right now, I do want to say a special thank you to Adam Rawlerson for being here and presenting, and also for being a great partner with us in this effort, from North Georgia Health Systems and from Laurelwood specifically. And then if you'll advance the next slide, just a reminder, here's some additional resources. Again, this will be posted on our website. One more slide. There we go. Special thanks to the people that I thanked earlier for the participation and helping to put this thing together. Thank you, and I hope you all have a wonderful evening.